Hey, Acquired listeners. We hope you enjoy this episode with CFO of Zillow Group, Kathleen Phillips. Just a quick heads up that the audio quality is a little bit rough this time around, and we recommend listening on speakers rather than headphones if you're able. We'll get back to our normal standards next episode. Thanks for bearing with us.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth?
Welcome to episode 22 of Acquired, the podcast about technology acquisitions. I'm Ben Gilbert.
I'm David Rosenthal.
And we are your hosts. We're on a serious roll here at Acquired, and we have an awesome guest for you today. We'll be talking about Zillow's 2015 acquisition of Trulia and their M&A strategy overall. Kathleen Phillips is our guest. She is the CFO of Zillow Group and was formerly Zillow's COO and General Counsel. She has run corporate development for her entire 6-year history at the company. She's also previously been a VP and General Counsel for StubHub and Hotwire. Welcome, and thanks so much for coming on, Kathleen.
Well, thank you guys very much for having me. I'm super excited about having this conversation with you today.
So are we.
Thank you.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to talk about a new partner of ours here on Acquired, Legora, the agentic operating system that is redefining how the world's best legal teams work.
Yep, it's sort of obvious that AI is going to completely change the legal industry. I bet most of you listening have dropped a contract into some sort of AI chatbot out there. Legora took that insight and asked the question, what if you really built something with that power from the ground up for the legal industry?
So the founders did exactly what great founders do, operate with obsessive customer focus. They embedded inside a massive law firm for months. They sat with the lawyers just watching how the work really gets done.
And that's how you get features that customers love, like tabular review, where you drop in a folder of hundreds of contracts and it pulls every key term into a grid a lawyer can actually work with. Legora's bet here is interesting. Since it lets each lawyer handle more complexity, any given person can increase the quality of their work and do higher value work. And this means that the pie can grow even as each individual task takes less time.
And they recently launched Legora Agent, offering greater intelligence and performance. The agent lets lawyers set an objective. Then it can handle the planning and the execution and delivery of the final product. Legal teams get to maintain full control and transparency since they're still involved where judgment is required.
And Legora works where you already work. You can use it within Microsoft Word while redlining or drafting. The early Legora numbers essentially speak for themselves. When they have a head-to-head pilot with their top competitor, they win 70% of the time. Legora now has over 100,000 lawyers on the platform from 1,200 legal teams in 50 countries. And crazily, they went from 1 million to 100 million in ARR in about 18 months.
Truly insane numbers. And that is the real test. Plenty of things demo well, but the question is whether a busy associate actually reaches for it during crunch time, or whether a partner trusts it before going into a conversation with a major client. If your legal team wants to check it out, whether you're a law firm or you're in-house at a company, you can learn more at legora.com/acquired and just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
All right. Well, I think it's time to dive in.
With that.
Yeah, normally, Kathleen, David leads us through the acquisition history and facts. I figured the best way to cover it in this episode would be kind of David, you lead and kind of have a discussion with Kathleen on.
I'm sure lots and lots of good stuff will come up. This was as we joke on the show, and we were joking with Kathleen before we started recording, we love two things. We love public company acquisitions, two things on the show, public company acquisitions where everything about the negotiations comes out in the SEC filings, and lawsuits where the same thing happens. So
fortunately, we just have the former.
Yes, fortunately, just the former in this case, I'm sure for Kathleen's sanity. So maybe I will do a very quick history and facts on the founding of both Zillow and Trulia, and then we'll jump into the acquisition process with Kathleen. Zillow was founded in 2005 by Rich Barton and Lloyd Frank, who previously had worked together at Microsoft here in Seattle. and then had founded Expedia in 1996, which probably most of our listeners are familiar with. And that was, a lot of people don't know these days, was founded within Microsoft. It was a division within Microsoft that they started. And then they spun it out from Microsoft and it became a separate public company in 2001. And then in 2005, they left and they started Zillow. And Zillow's is focused, as is Trulia, on the U.S. Housing market and buying and selling of houses and real estate. And Zillow's big innovation, that was the big brand that they launched with in 2006, was this concept of the Zestimate. So it was a data-driven estimate for every home in their database about what that home would be worth on the market. And this was, I believe, the first time that U.S. homeowners had any idea of what, any indication of what the value of their house might be without actually putting it on the market. And it was based on a whole bunch of factors, but especially access to comps of houses that were selling in the market around the house. So this was a big deal, generated a lot of press. Zillow, over its private company lifespan, raised about $80 million in venture capital from Benchmark, TCV, and others. Ends up going public in July of 2011. And we will press pause and pick up the story in a minute. Meanwhile, Trulia was, unlike Zillow, which is based up here in Seattle, Trulia was founded a year earlier in 2004 in the Bay Area by Pete Flint and Sami Inkinen, who were actually students at a place close to my heart, the Stanford Graduate School of Business. They were MBA students, and they founded the company in between their first and second years when they were, according to legend, and I know how difficult this was having lived through it, trying to find housing for their second year at Stanford Business School in Palo Alto and having a very difficult time and thought there's got to be a better way. So they work on it during their second year. They end up raising over the years significantly less in venture capital, $33 million from Excel and Sequoia and others. And then Trulia goes public in September of 2012. And that's where we pick up the story actually a little bit before then, when, according to the SEC filings of the ultimate acquisition, it was actually before Trulia went public, but after Zillow had just gone public, that Zillow approached Trulia the first time about potentially acquiring the company in late 2011.
So I want to pause and say, Kathleen, number one, did we get any of that, or is that all right? And then number two, had you been at Zillow yet at this point?
Yes, I joined Zillow in July of 2010, almost exactly a year before we completed our IPO. So 2010 through July of 2011 for me was completely focused on getting that deal done. And then the rest of it, you got absolutely right.
Great. So you'd just gone public in 2011, and then it must have been very shortly thereafter that you approached Trulia this first time. What was, were you guys kind of waiting to get public and then sort of approach Trulia from that position of strength there? What was the thought process behind that?
Yeah, so it was more a factor of us having, liquid public currency following the IPO. And that was actually one of the primary reasons that we concluded the IPO. And you can see that if you look at our timeline of acquisitions. We had done one small acquisition prior to July 2011. But then as we had stock available that was liquid and publicly traded, that was really our goal, was to give us the flexibility to pursue more acquisitions. And Trulia was the natural choice to start with first.
Yep. And gosh, we know, being on the VC side and working with many private companies, some of which at various times are either approached by or thinking about approaching other private companies to talk about merging. And it is so difficult to agree on value when both companies, nobody has any idea what either company's stock is worth.
That's absolutely true. And it's also a complex endeavor to think about an acquisition of the scale that it would have been between Zillow and Trulia, followed by an IPO. And having to construct that story is far more complicated than, knowing our own business as we did and being able to tell a great story to the street.
And not to mention having, when public companies acquire one another, all their financial data is available to the public, whereas when you're private,
absolutely.
It's not. So in this round of talks in 2011, Trulia does end up hiring an investment bank as an advisor. They hire Catalyst. But talks break down in early 2012. And then in August 2012, so a few months later, Trulia is preparing their own IPO, and Kathleen and Zillow approach again and try a second time. Did you guys know that Trulia was on the path to going public at that point?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it was such a natural thing for them to be doing. We had forged the path ahead for them. They had a very similar story. We knew that was something they aspired to do. So we expected that would happen.
Did you ever consider waiting to IPO for them to IPO first and give investors confidence in this sort of business?
We never really thought about it with respect to them. And we were always a much larger player. So we were charting our own course. So we didn't really think about our timing relative to theirs.
Got it.
Yep. So talks break down again for the second time. And in September of 2012, Trulia completes their IPO and continues executing as a public company for a while, as is Zillow at this point. And I believe during the first couple of years, I didn't look up the exact number, but I'm remembering, I remember it super well when Zillow went public. It was one of the first Seattle tech companies to go public in a long time. Zillow's market cap, I believe, was right around $600-700 million at IPO.
Yeah, I think that's about right. It's been a while. The thing that I remember very well is that our revenue, I think, was something around 40 million, which the reason I note that is because when we look at our group of emerging businesses now, they're larger than we were when we went public.
Yeah.
So we've made a lot of progress in the last 5 years. It's pretty terrific.
Yeah, I mean, the growth was just incredible still is, but in those early years as a public company. And by this point, after Trulia's IPO and a couple of years later, again, I don't have the information in front of me, but you were, your market cap was multiples higher of what it had been at the IPO, I believe, right?
Yes.
So a couple years go by, finally spring of 2014. So not quite 2 years after Trulia's IPO, and the last time Zillow and Trulia had danced the acquisition dance. Zillow is still thinking about this, and it's a natural fit that these two companies would come together. And so you guys take an interesting step, and you go out and you talk to public shareholders of both Zillow and Trulia under NDA with major shareholders to talk about potential, according to the SEC filings, quote, potential strategic opportunities, including the acquisition of Trulia. How did you guys think about taking that step?
So there's an important clarification here, which is they were the same shareholders. So our major shareholders also held a stake in Trulia. So this was not a matter of us approaching Trulia shareholders who we did not have in common. So it makes a little bit more sense when you think about it from that perspective. And part of the our investors all along who were invested in both was that ultimately there would be a transaction. They had no ability to predict when or to direct that. But it was such a natural industrial logic that that was part of what they were betting on.
That makes sense. And at this point in time, and I'm sure still the thesis of a lot of public company public markets investors that hold Zillow Group stock is, real estate is this enormous market, and it's coming online for the first time. And, the market share of online players in real estate is still tiny compared to the whole market. And we just want to invest in that wave that's coming.
That's absolutely right. And, one of the stats that bears that out is that we think that notwithstanding our category leadership, we have about 2/3 of the traffic on the web overall and 3/4 on mobile on Zillow brand properties. And yet we only touch about 4% of real estate transactions in the U.S.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a massive greenfield still there for us to take advantage of. And we see this huge opportunity ahead of us still.
Yeah, it's incredible. It still boggles my mind, having followed this market, closely for several years, how little of the real estate market is, as you said, being touched by any online player, whether it's you guys or Redfin or other folks. It's and having shopped for houses myself online, I can't imagine doing it, the old way through, newspapers or just working with, offline agents.
Yeah, I mean, it is remarkable. And obviously it's a key reason why we continue to invest in the business, because we think it's really the long-term opportunity, many years down the road when this is going to be a mature market. So it's pretty exciting. And it honestly, it keeps us disciplined. We get asked all the time, how come we haven't expanded internationally, for example? And, the reason is because the opportunity right in front of us is so huge. That we try to stay focused on that. So it's a pretty exciting time. And with the Trulia acquisition, we dramatically accelerated the expansion of our scale.
Yeah, and I would bet this is one of those things where there are a lot of different sectors right now that have a large generation gap, as with any adoption of new technology. But real estate in particular, it seems like I'm 27 myself, and my whole peer group kind of live on Zillow for entertainment value. I mean, it's amazing how...
And you're not a homeowner.
Right. Yeah, I rent. And it's amazing how often Zillow links get sent around.
Just wait till you own a home and then you want to track its value.
Right. Well, we hope so. Right. I mean, that's...
I would imagine you have like a massively... It's significantly more than 4% of millennials buying homes, right? It has to be many multiples of that, but significantly less than older generations. And do you guys track that and look at that and try to specifically target younger folks buying homes for the first time or anything like that?
Well, I think it sort of happens naturally, right? Because of the millennials are used to doing everything online. So yes, we keep them in mind when we're designing our products. The cool thing about that is, we've just recently taken a look at buyer activity in the market. And for the first time, about 50% of home transactions are actually involving millennials. So they're starting to buy, which wasn't happening a handful of years ago. So, it's great because it's a great, opportunity for our product because it really resonates with them. So it's an exciting time as that market starts to develop. And as you know, sort of the generational focus of the real estate market shifts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see it every day in our peer group. I mean, I'm 31 and, it's kind of like that, when you get to the end of your 20s, early 30s, it's amazing how much your conversations start shifting to like, oh, what's the real estate market like? And like, oh yeah, I've been home shopping and I put in like 3 offers and it's like a switch flips.
Right. And I think that's much more true in Seattle. In San Francisco, unfortunately, it's still pretty challenging for young people. But I think in Seattle, folks in their early 30s are really thinking about settling down, and suddenly, it's not uncool to be a homeowner anymore.
Yeah. And with the market such as it is and how competitive, like I can't imagine not having these online tools to help navigate it.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
All right, listeners, now is a great time to tell you about a longtime friend of the show, Vanta. AI has scrambled the whole security picture. It used to be that you proved that you were secure once a year, an audit or a static PDF, then everyone would nod and you're done. But in an AI-first world, that doesn't hold up anymore.
Yep, your risk surface changes every week now. A vendor turns on an AI feature or someone writes in a new model without telling IT, and your posture is different than it was last week, let alone at your last audit. Vanta's own research found that around 70% of companies have this quote-unquote shadow AI running with no security review at all.
Right. And that's where Vanta comes in. They're the leading agentic trust platform, meaning they've built the thing that closes the gap. And the way that they close that gap is Vanta Agent. Think of it as a GRC engineer, that's governance, risk, and compliance, except that it's software and it doesn't sleep. It finds the issues, drafts the fixes, and cuts the time that you'd spend on vendor assessments in half.
In half, which is exactly why more than 16,000 companies today run on Vanta. Companies like Ramp, Cursor, and Snowflake all stay audit ready and catch the risks that crop up between audits across every vendor, every AI tool, the whole environment.
And that's the real value. Trust has to be continuous now, which is why Vanta automates your security, your compliance, and the work to earn and prove trust. We're huge fans of Vanta over here, and literally hundreds of acquired listeners have become Vanta customers at their companies over the years. So you can get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/acquired. That's VANTA.com/acquired for $1,000 off. And just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
So getting back to the drama of the deal. So you'd spoken to shareholders and obviously they were holding, if they were already holding both stocks, their thesis was, I would imagine, quite supportive of a combination. In early June, you guys end up hiring Goldman Sachs as an advisor before you approach Trulia again. And then this is where the day-by-day, and we'll link to this in the show notes, the day-by-day negotiations in the filing are just start to play out, and it's so much fun to read. So apparently on June 3rd, Rich Barton contacts Pete Flint. Rich is at that point, was Rich still the CEO of Zillow, or had he moved to
No,
chairman
Spencer became CEO prior to our IPO, and Rich was chairman throughout that time and still is.
Got it. So he's chairman, and he contacts Pete Flint, who's CEO and co-founder of Trulia, and attempts to schedule a dinner on June 3rd. And quote, Mr. Flint indicated that his near-term schedule would not accommodate a dinner.
Which
Little did he know
me.
what was coming.
It happens to me all the time, so I totally understand.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I would say, not to put any words in Pete's mouth, but I think he knew very well what was coming. But keep in mind the backdrop of this, which is, we were pretty fierce competitors for a long time. We each admired what the other was doing. But we were playing in the same sandbox. We had been around and around about valuation a couple of times. And I think both companies went through a long period of believing we should just go it our own. And, shifting course from that is challenging when you're looking at a company that you've grown from the ground up.
Yeah. Not to mention the psychology here. I mean, it's a little bit of a prisoner's dilemma, right? Like both sides probably, I can only imagine the amount of posturing. Like you want to show strength because even though, both sides might feel, and obviously did in the end feel that a combination was, the best outcome for both, I'm sure you were very focused on how you were going to do in that negotiation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we owe nothing less to our shareholders, right?
Absolutely.
So both parties are interested in getting the best terms possible.
As did the, Pete and the Trulia board for their shareholders. So on June 5th, 2 days later, Rich contacts Pete again, and this time is more overt and says the Zillow board fully supports a merger proposal and mentions that you've spoken to these shareholders that you have in common and that they're supportive of the merger as well. And then a couple of days later, Rich does send the letter to Pete and to Greg Waldorf, who was Trulia's lead director. Had in the previous negotiations, had things gotten to that point before? Had you guys put a deal on the table, so to speak, or was this a new tactic you were taking?
We had not directly put anything before the Trulia board. We had, I recall, one meeting with more representatives of management on both sides. And I expect and am sure that Pete and team would have conveyed the substance of our discussions to the board, but we had never directly approached the board. I mean, this was a way of kind of turning up the urgency of the offer a little bit.
And indeed, I mean, it's the process must have been a whirlwind. I mean, it was less than 6 weeks later, I think the merger ends up getting announced. So from kind of, even though you'd had these stalled talks in the past from over the couple of years, but to go from zero to fully negotiating and announcing a merger, that's a tight timeline.
Yes, and I actually was going to bring that up as I was looking over this. I was getting tired just reading it because I remember this time so well. But the really critical time period that you're looking at is, from July 1st when we start diligence to July 28th when we announce the merger, we did full diligence and negotiation of the acquisition agreement. So 27 days is pretty quick. We have a terrific internal finance and legal team, and they were working around the clock. We all were. But it's part of how we do deals at Zillow. We try to move them through really quickly so that we can get back to our day jobs. I can't think of an acquisition that we've done that we took more than about 20 days. This one took a little bit longer because it was a little more complex. But we try to get them kicked off and done to avoid distraction, to avoid risk of us losing the deal. And like I said, to get back to business as usual.
Yeah, and as we were talking about before the show, I mean, one of the things that I really admire about getting to know some of the folks at Zillow over the last couple of years, and it's important for our audience to know, Kathleen, it's not like your only job was to be head of corp dev, right? Like you had quite a lot of other operational responsibilities at the company at the same time, right?
That is absolutely true. At the time, I was still chief operating officer of Zillow. So in addition to having legal under my umbrella and corporate development, I had the whole people organization. And people are our most valuable asset. So I couldn't just ignore them while we were busy on this deal. And, that didn't end with the signing of the acquisition agreement. We'll get to the FTC review and all of that later. But for me, it was about 8 months that I was pretty fully consumed on this.
Wow.
Which was great fun. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. So what's pretty interesting here to me is, especially not having lived through this with public company merger side, but on the private company side, you guys converged on a number pretty quickly. I mean, there's a range there from 30 of your first offer to Pete coming back after a few rounds with 37, but that's not a lot of difference compared to, I'm used to, well, we think 10% and we think, 60%. How did you guys, structure things like, I'm sure this helped it move along much faster. Like, were there specific things that you did that got that range, tight very quickly?
Yeah. So, I wish I could say we're some kind of financial geniuses and we had some model that dictated this, but it really was as simple as we had, side by side, nearly 10 years of operating history. And we were always kind of 2/3 and they were 1/3. So it was a pretty natural way to think about the valuation. And interestingly, even now, a year post closing, in terms of lead volume, it still is about 2/3 to 1/3. So, we really were quibbling at the margin there because with all the public company data out there, it was very obvious to us what the correct proportion was, given how similar the businesses were.
Which is interesting because 2 days later, on July 5th, Rich and Pete talk again. And on that conversation, they basically agree, yep, 33% is what makes sense here. And then they move on to start discussing some of the non-price related terms, which I want to get into, which I'm sure were fascinating. And at least according to the filings, that's when they first start discussing retention packages for the Trulia management team and employees. Especially for you, given, that you were in charge of people at the time too. How did you guys start to think about that? I mean, it ends up, the final package, I believe, we'll get to at the end, but I believe ends up being $33 million in equity retention for Trulia management. How did you even get to, set a framework for thinking about that?
Yeah, it was super complicated, I will say, as you might guess. And it really involved an exercise of kind of putting ourselves in the shoes of the Trulia management and thinking about who did we need to keep for various time periods. And we were cognizant of preserving their culture and preserving their team, and keeping folks interested. And, we never lost sight of the psychology of this deal, which is, being acquired by your primary competitor who you have competed with ferociously for 10 years. Yep. So, we felt like we needed to keep folks energized and make everybody feel like this was a winning deal.
And this is a good spot, I think, too, to jump off into one of the really interesting things about this deal. The plan was never, or at least at the beginning, not immediately, to combine the two products. I mean, they're still very much separate brands, separate products, separate sites with separate customer bases. So, of course, you needed Trulia management to stay involved and motivated, and they were obviously very good at running Trulia. How did you guys at Zillow sort of evaluate from that spectrum of completely independent Trulia within the Zillow Group umbrella to merging Trulia directly with Zillow.com? What was that evaluation process like?
Well, we always knew that we wanted to keep both brands. It's easy when you're looking at Zillow in a vacuum to kind of forget about what a strong business and strong brand Trulia was on its own. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of brand equity there. Very strong team doing different things than we were doing, even though, our ultimate consumer missions were very well aligned. And we knew that there were, consumers out in the marketplace who strongly preferred one over the other. So there never was any question about, just folding the Trulia brand into Zillow. But what we did recognize was there were a lot of other things that we could fold into one. For example, our ingestion of real estate listings. Yep. We run from a central source now. So there's efficiency there, which unlike in, more industrial type mergers of competitors, rather than us shedding product development resources because of these efficiencies, instead it let us deploy a bunch of very talented people to new products and new projects that we never would have had time to do on our own. Perfect example of that is there's a substantial development team in San Francisco that were former Trulia people who now work for Zillow Group broadly, and they developed our Premier Agent app, which is one of our most successful product launches of this year and is really the foundation for a lot of the developments that we've been seeing in our ad products. So, it was a gold mine of talent that we could deploy to things that were far more interesting in the end for both our consumers and our advertisers.
Yeah, can you mentioned the Premier Agent, product or business line. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what the strategy is behind that for Zillow Group All Up?
Sure. So, fundamentally what it is a subscription-based advertising product where agents pay to be promoted next to for sale listings to be potential buyers agents for consumers. With the acquisition of Trulia, that advertising is purchased by agents across both properties. Mm-hmm. So the agents are advertising on both Zillow and Trulia. And it has been, it is the workhorse of our revenue. Definitely the focus of our efforts, our sales efforts, as well as our development efforts. It's been hugely successful. More recently, what we've been seeing is really innovative and entrepreneurial agents who are forming agent teams and buying advertising in large quantities and really building big businesses from which to operate.
One of the things that we talk a lot about on this show is we joke about it. Ben Thompson, we are just huge fans of his writing and his thinking. And, he talks about aggregation theory and one of the consequences, aggregation theory being that, in the kind of the information economy as opposed to the industrial economy, aggregating customers and having the best customer experience and ability to do that is the winning strategy versus in an industrial economy where distribution is costly and has friction. You want to aggregate distribution and think about customers second. And one of the things I love about the Zillow Group business and this merger in particular is it's such a pure play example of that. Like there are these levers in distribution that by being internet based, you have, and then by combining these businesses, whether it's acquiring the data feeds about data on homes and home sales, which we'll get into in a minute because there's more drama to come there, or advertising sales, or what have you, your website backends. It doesn't make sense for any of that to be separate. But what does make sense to put the combined effort of the companies into is exactly what you're saying, is developing these great customer experiences, whether it's the advertising customer or the homeowner, home buyer customer. It's cool to watch. And so when you guys were thinking about the rationale for this merger, was that like, as you're identifying kind of the key levers for this, like was that at the front of your mind? Or?
Oh, absolutely. And I would say it has unfolded in a way that was even far more beneficial than we could have imagined. We were most focused on the acceleration of our audience growth, which is, natural when you're running an internet media business. And we thought that there would be some other benefits of scale, but those have far exceeded our expectations. And real estate listings is a perfect example of that. I mean, we struggled, and I think we're going to get to this a little bit later about the listings drama. We struggled in acquiring listings. Over the years, there were parties who just didn't want to provide them to us. Now it's pretty difficult for listings providers to look at the dominant real estate brand on the web and say, oh no, it's not in our sellers' interest to have their listings on Zillow or Trulia. It's unfathomable to make that argument anymore. Yeah. So that has our ability to attract direct listings was certainly strengthened by this acquisition because of the scale.
And that perfectly follows the same framework that you can apply to a Facebook or a Google, that if it's what the users want and it's what the people on their app or their website, the best user experience they can flock to, it gives you enormous power in getting the content to get in front of them, and then run whatever business you want to on top of that. And in Zillow and Trulia's case, it's selling advertisers to selling advertisements to the real estate agents who want to list next to those properties.
Yeah. Ben, you're
bleeding
into my tech theme, but all right, let's get through the acquisition drama, which there's still more juice to come, and then we'll get into the also fun stuff on tech themes. Trulia's board comes back with a counteroffer at 34.5%, and then also includes official terms on some of the non-price stuff. So includes a go shop clause, which for our listeners who aren't familiar with that would basically mean that if this clause were in the merger agreement after it was signed and announced, Trulia could still entertain other offers from other potential acquirers. They also wanted a fairly large breakup fee in case the merger didn't happen that Zillow would have to pay.
And to give people kind of a sense of how taxing this is on an organization, the breakup fee ended up being $150 million. So that's effectively the kind of opportunity cost that the two parties believe that Trulia could be spending focusing on their own operations instead of being distracted by a deal that didn't go through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just imagine how many people and how much time it would take to justify $150 million of value.
Yeah. And it's just not even a day goes by. The Zillow board basically says right off the bat, like, nope, not going to fly. No way. 33% final offer and no go shop in the agreement. What was that like when you guys received that counter offer?
Oh gosh, I'd have to mine my memory on that one. I mean, this is a dance. So you don't, throughout this process, I try to avoid placing too much weight on any specific set of terms that somebody is coming back with, because we know where we're going to end up, because we know what we're willing to tolerate, and you kind of push each other around. So I don't recall that there was any particular shock. With an acquisition of a competitor like this, there was just no way we were going to entertain a go shop. It wouldn't have made sense. And honestly, I'm not sure it would have made sense for either of us, because it just would have created some frenzy in the market that wasn't going to benefit either of us in the end. So, I don't recall any particular drama associated with that. We knew what we were marching toward and what we would tolerate.
Yeah, there was no way that at least you guys were going to have that. So July 28th, finally, the merger gets announced, and you start working towards close.
And I should mention here, because when we walk through it like this, it makes it feel like all that was happening was the price negotiation. You have to picture, 50 people or so at Zillow working on the merger agreement and all the diligence, because we needed to announce it right away. So, it was a pretty nerve-wracking period of time where we were still waiting to reach agreement on key terms. But meanwhile, we're negotiating the whole host of other things that you negotiate in the merger agreement.
Which gets me to the what I think is certainly the most amusing part of this deal that I was going to bring up. After you announce on July 28th, and then news comes out and the market reacts, but news also comes out then that Trulia's co-founder, not Pete, but Sami Inkinen, was literally in a rowboat in a cruise skull rowing across the Pacific Ocean for the entire time that this negotiation was going on.
That is right. I don't know what it was like in that boat, but we probably would, jockey to say who was feeling a little bit more miserable at the time. Right?
And so he and his wife, the two of them in a rowboat, in a cruise skull, rowing thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean
to Hawaii
from California.
Yep.
Were you able to reach him by satellite phone, or what was that? Like?
I honestly don't remember whether he had given someone his proxy before he left. I don't believe he was in any kind of substantive contact beyond making sure they were safe out on the boat. But I really just don't remember.
Well, presumably he'd given proxy to somebody, because I would imagine he would need to vote his shares for the deal. But
yeah,
that's a first here on Acquired.
Yeah, that is a first. We have never had a story like that. It's pretty awesome. He seems like quite a cool guy and character, as you would imagine from that. So that was sort of all the pre-close challenges, but then the pre-announced challenges, and then the post-announcement challenges start. So this deal underwent a serious amount of FTC and government regulatory scrutiny, right? I mean, there were 2 requests for information, which is uncommon. Typically, the FTC will make one request for information in reviewing, coming to a decision, which they ultimately decided that Trulia and Zillow was not, but whether this merger would create a monopoly in the market, which obviously would be illegal. And so typically they'll do one request, but in this case they did 2, and that's usually taken as a bad sign by the market. And indeed, when that happened, the share prices reacted negatively. What was all that, drama like? I mean, you guys must have been on knife's edge.
Yeah, it was a pretty nerve-wracking period for all of us. I essentially spent 4 months in DC full time, trying to get the deal pushed through. For those out there who aren't familiar with the FTC approach in this kind of case, what they're trying to determine is what is the correct definition of a market. And once they have defined that market, then whether there is monopoly pricing power in the market based upon the combination. And the FTC was having fits and starts about, is the online real estate portal market a market unto itself?
Yeah.
And our view was no. I mean, most of the activity that takes place in this market takes place way outside of where we are. One stat about that is what I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, which is, we think we touch about 4% of transactions. And we think we have a small percentage of advertising spend by real estate agents. That being said, if you look solely at consumer transaction to real estate portals only, we're pretty big. So tons of back and forth and economic analysis, hours and hours and hours of depositions. And ultimately, we think they reached the right decision. But I had a lot of sleepless nights, I can tell you that. And, for me personally, I felt like the weight of the deal was on me running this process.
Not
but
only
we
had
had
corp dev, but also general counsel, right?
Right. Well, we have a general counsel, Brad Owens, who runs most of this, but for this, I'm still chief legal officer, and I was on point for the deal. So I was the one in the thick of it while he was holding down all the things that needed to be done in Seattle. So, it was quite a time. I think I aged a few extra years in that 6 months.
I bet. How does the FTC decide what the market is? I mean, is it like a number of transactions, or is it a dollar amount, or how do they determine? Because you could imagine two people hanging out on the street. One guy wants to sell something to the other. That right there is a market.
Yeah. So they look at it through many, many different lenses. We had multiple economic experts, many, many antitrust lawyers who work on these kinds of cases every day. Mm-hmm. And what they're looking for is any characterization of the market that can give someone, additional pricing power simply by virtue of the combination is what they're concerned with. It's an interesting thought process in our transaction because the pricing power they were thinking about, of course, our products are all free to consumers, was will the price of online real estate advertising be impacted by this combination for real estate agents? So, does it become more expensive for real estate agents to advertise simply by virtue of this combination?
Yeah. How deep did they go? I mean, I imagine it was a 6-month review. And as you said, you practically lived in Washington for 4 months. I mean, were they subpoenaing or the equivalent thereof in this process information? I mean, like, were they looking back at like the Series A pitch decks of both companies? Or,
oh, yeah.
Wow.
All of our email, everything.
Wow.
Yeah. To see our own characterization of the transaction, right? And given the long history of this acquisition dance, there was a lot there. They were talking to other market participants. They were talking to individual real estate agents. We didn't have full visibility into all of their activities, but we would hear anecdotally from people in the industry who would say they had calls or been deposed or provided documents, and they had their own economic experts. So it was an incredibly in-depth and detailed process.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good reminder for those of us, it's in the broader defined Silicon Valley ecosystem. It's so easy to be like blasé about, I'm starting a startup, we're gonna like take over this market, or just like, you actually need to be really careful about how you characterize things, because you can end up in this nightmare scenario.
Yeah, and even with perfectly innocent characterizations of market dynamics can be taken out of context or paired with other information and can cause real questions about your intentions and the potential outcome.
Yep.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to thank our longtime friend of the show, ServiceNow. If you are running a large enterprise, AI agents are likely spread across every team, and deploying them is no longer the hard part.
Yeah. The hard part is knowing what permissions they have, what employees are using them for, or what decisions AI is making. AI security for an enterprise at scale is not a small concern. Like, the risks are real.
Exactly. And the challenge with AI is governing it, securing it, measuring it, and making sure that it actually delivers value. That is why ServiceNow built the AI Control Tower.
Yep. AI Control Tower gives enterprises a single place to see, manage, govern, and optimize AI across the entire business. And it works with any AI, not just theirs. Every device on your network, every permission across every system, every AI agent visible and secure in one place.
And ServiceNow can do this because they've spent more than 20 years building the operational backbone of the enterprise, the workflows, governance, approvals, security controls, and institutional knowledge that power how work actually gets done across IT, HR, customer service, finance, and security.
ServiceNow already runs more than 100 billion workflows annually and trillions of transactions for more than 85% of the Fortune 500. So when companies need a place to govern AI at enterprise scale, they're building on a platform at the center of how their business already operates.
And in a future that isn't going to be one AI, it's going to be thousands of AI agents working across every function of the company. But the question is, who's managing them all?
So if you're trying to turn AI ambition into real business outcomes and make it work safely, securely, at scale, go check out servicenow.com/acquired and tell them that Ben and David sent you.
Well, hey, I want to talk a little bit about the MLSs
Yeah,
and data
that's
feeds.
exactly.
But maybe let's do that quick. And then I really want to talk about Zillow Group's overall acquisition strategy and sort of how it fits into the landscape for the next few years, and kind of, Kathleen, give you a chance to talk about that. So let's talk about kind of what happened.
Well,
with those
real quick, and then we'll wrap up the history. The final twist in the story here is right before, so the FTC finally approves the merger in February, and then it goes through and you close the deal. But right before that happens, both Trulia and Zillow were getting, I believe, if not a significant amount of your real estate listings from a company called ListHub, which is a data provider, which was actually owned by a third competitor in the market, Move.com, which had, I believe, just been acquired by News Corp. And ListHub actually cuts off both Trulia and Zillow from these data feeds, which are the lifeblood of your business. And so you had this other wrinkle of like, now you have to go rebuild your supply essentially from the ground up by signing direct data deals with all the MLS or multiple listing service. For people who aren't familiar with the market, these are local organizations that aggregate real estate listings as they come on the market in each city, each geography kind of within the country, and there are hundreds, if not thousands of them. And so all of a sudden now you guys have to go do biz dev deals with all these folks directly. Wow.
Can you just talk about that process and what that was like?
Sure. So let me just tie that back to the FTC for a second, because, of course, one of our arguments to the FTC is, how can we be a monopoly when our oil, which is our listings, are controlled by a competitor who's sponsored by the National Association of Realtors? It kind of boggles the mind to think we could be the monopoly when they provide us all these listings. The cutoff of the listings actually came as a result of a natural termination of our contract. And we had engaged in negotiations to try and renew. So it wasn't overnight. We knew this could happen. So we had been gearing up for a substantial amount of time to try and cover this, because, of course, you never want to run your business at the mercy of one of your competitors, which is essentially what that was. Now, that's sort of a plain way to put it. One thing that people don't focus on is there was actually a pretty symbiotic relationship between Zillow and Trulia and ListHub, because ListHub's primary business is not syndication of listings. It's the sale of listing reports to agents that say things like, your listing on 123 Main Street was viewed 50 times on Zillow. So it's not as straightforward as to say we were at their mercy, because actually we were a key ingredient to their business as well. It's just that once they were acquired by Move, and then subsequently Move was acquired by News Corp, they were thinking about that business differently from a strategic perspective. Yeah. So we had already engaged in a ton of effort, knowing that this could happen and not wanting to have this relationship with a competitor. But we certainly had to try pretty hard at that. And as I said at the very beginning of this conversation, one of the unforeseen benefits of the combination was that our increased scale sure made it a lot easier to get those listings. Not that it was easy, and it's an ongoing process, but it was a lot easier to go as number 1 and 2 in the market to try and acquire these listings than it had been when we were on our own.
Yep. Let's move on. I think, Ben, the right frame to discuss what you were talking about in Zillow's M&A strategy generally is let's quickly do acquisition category. To me, this is pretty clearly a business line acquisition of, well, I guess, I don't know, maybe you think differently. Like,
yeah, it's funny. The way I was going to categorize it is, so Kathleen, and for our new listeners, we have several different categories: people, technology, product, business line, asset, which is newly added, or other. And in this scenario, what I really think was the way I look at this deal is it's a rapid way to expand the kind of core marketplace that Zillow offers. So, on the supply side of the marketplace, you have people who are looking at pages that display homes, and on the demand, on the demand side of the marketplace, you have real estate agents that want to advertise their services. And so to me, this is just providing, it's buying more supply and more demand, and kind of putting the two together. And there's all sorts of interesting, ways.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's like, I totally agree with you. Like, it's a business line acquisition, but not a new business line. It's
Right.
the same business line.
It's buying more supply and demand of the same business line, and kind of like, having multiple marketplaces, but having ways to, for example, the combined portal for real estate agents to put their ads on both.
Ads on both, yep.
The ability to funnel to both of those marketplaces simultaneously. Yeah, I almost want to say asset in that case, but it's like an asset generating product.
I don't want to create another new category. We have enough. That's why I stuffed it into business line.
Yeah, I mean, another way to say it is it was sort of honestly kind of a time machine acquisition, right? Just accelerating what each of us was doing already by putting it together. Yeah. So you're exactly right. It's both sides of supply and demand, and we each, combined got where we were going a lot faster.
Yep.
Very cool. Well, how does this fit into, what's the Zillow Group strategy for the next couple of years, and why have you been doing the acquisitions you're doing, and how does this fit into that picture?
Yeah, so, I mean, this one is pretty different than our other acquisitions because it really was just an acceleration of our scale. In terms of overall strategy, I mean, we continue to invest in a number of different things. Dot Loop is a good example of a product that is designed to help real estate agents become more efficient and close more transactions more quickly, which in the end we believe will make our advertising more valuable to them. It's also, kind of doubling down on having agents embrace technology by closing transactions online versus on paper. So that's an extension of the products and services that we provide agents that really enhances the value of the advertising they buy from us. The other branded acquisitions, Naked Apartments, Hot Pads, and StreetEasy, are just continuing to build out our portfolio of brands so that we have something for everybody, for whatever they're looking for. Hot Pads tends to focus on younger urban renters. StreetEasy is focused only on New York, primarily was focused on purchase and sale, but always had a rentals product, and now with the addition of Naked Apartments has open rentals, which are something that StreetEasy had not focused on before. And as we look at each of these candidates, and I mean, we look literally, like last year, I think we went back and counted, we looked at about 125 potential deals. Oh, wow. We think about, will this accelerate something that we are already doing and get us there faster? Is it something we haven't figured out yet? Is another way of going. But fundamental in every acquisition, what we start with is we look at the people and decide whether they are people who we could work well with within our existing Zillow Group portfolio, because ultimately we are acquiring the people who have built these brilliant products, and we want them to stay. We want them to be successful with us.
How do you think about, when you acquire a Naked Apartments or a Hot Pads, those properties aren't being combined. They're different websites with their own ability to acquire traffic. Do you combine the back end, real estate agent services, or what ways do you? I hate using the word, but how do you achieve synergies, and why is it advantageous for Zillow Group to own those businesses?
Yeah, so Hot Pads is a great example. One of the things that's pretty cool is we look at teams that are really good at certain things. And when Hot Pads joined us, we realized, for example, that they were really good at ingesting rentals feeds and normalizing them to present them in a way that was useful to consumers. So now a segment of the Hot Pads team is responsible for all rentals listings syndication throughout our entire platform. And so we tend to kind of pick and choose where there are strengths within each of the teams. StreetEasy, for example, because they're a New York City brand, very focused on vertical living, And, while they don't work directly on vertical living products for our other brands, they certainly inform and educate our teams about how to present a condo building versus a single family home.
Very cool. So it's almost like a little reverse acquisition of knowledge there to get that DNA up into the rest of the Zillow Group products.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's move quickly into tech themes then, which is one of our favorite parts of the show. I had a tech theme written down that I'm going to mention, and we'll link to this in the show notes. There was a great interview with Rich Barton in the New York Times a couple of years ago. The interview was focusing on you're like this hit maker. You have Expedia, you have Zillow. Rich was intimately involved in the origins of Glassdoor and Avo and many other marketplace-based, really, important marketplace-based businesses. Kind of what's your secret? And Rich said, the thing that I think about is quote, what piece of marketplace information do people crave and don't have? And I think that's really interesting. Zillow is like a perfect example of that. I want to know what my home's worth, and I don't have that.
Right.
And once you give that to me, I'm like a mouse in a lab, turning the wheel to get the cheese. I want to know every week what's my home worth. And I think that was a really good example. The other one I want to throw out quickly, Kathleen, that you've talked about a bit on this show, isn't so much at the normal level of technology themes for us on this show, but we talk, being a VC and working with management teams and entrepreneurs and founders, hiring and building your organization from a people perspective takes as much time as anything else in the business, if not more time. And we always talk about it's so important to hire athletes, not literally athletes, although literally athletes can be great too. But, and people talk well, what does that really mean? And I think Zillow and your M&A strategy is a great example of that, of people who are very smart, very flexible in their thinking and can adapt and over time play multiple roles, because that's what you need in a startup. You can't predict exactly where the market's going to go, where your product's going to go, your organization. And, I think you guys have done a really good job, both in your hiring, obviously, of your management team, but also your acquisitions, of looking for these types of people who can evolve their thinking and evolve their abilities as the company does, because that's going to be, that's going to be the constant in a high growth industry.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. And I can give you a couple of specific examples from the acquisitions. Susan Daimler, who now runs StreetEasy here in New York City, which is where I'm standing right now, she came to us by way of acquisition of the company Bifolio that she and her husband Matt started. And, as we needed a new leader for StreetEasy, Susan and Matt stepped in, and now they play a key role in the StreetEasy business. So, they went from running a very small company that was focused on sharing of information among co-shoppers to now running StreetEasy. So, perfect example of that. Justin LaJoy, who was the founder of Diverse Solutions. We've recently divested Diverse Solutions, but Justin is still with us running an entirely different product line. So we definitely look for culture fit and, a broad ability. Subject matter expertise is important, but it's not the critical piece. And you'll see that throughout our management team as we all move around in different roles and expand our skill sets.
Very interesting. And totally validates the tech theme. Mine. So what we do here at Pioneer Square Labs is come up with new business ideas and then work on them and try and spin them out as their own startup companies. And so we're always thinking about, how do we apply a framework from some business or a theme that's been successful in the recent years to new businesses. And one thing that Zillow and Trulia totally nailed is this idea that real-world objects are also media. And in traditional media companies, you can sell advertisements, against content, against articles people make or photos. And something that Zillow's done is, I touched on this earlier, they've made it a form of entertainment and a thing that people do together to share these listings, a lot because it's so aspirational. And Airbnb capitalizes on this too, where a lot of traffic is there not to buy, but just to participate in that experience.
Yeah,
and
we used to joke at when I worked at the Wall Street Journal that this is house porn.
Oh yeah, I mean, and something that folks miss a lot is we didn't have any real estate listings on Zillow for the first 3 years. We only had the Zestimates.
Oh wow.
Wow, did not know
So
Wow. So
yeah,
was
it's
there, I didn't know that. Was there a business model then, or was it kind of in construction?
I was not around. I'm sure that people had in mind all kinds of different ways that we were going to monetize, and we tried lots of different things, different kinds of ads for homes. But ultimately, the initial thought was build your audience first, and advertisers will come. And we still believe that, and that's also central to the investment thesis for Trulia is. Advertisers follow audience. So if you can increase your audience by a third over the span of 6 months, you're going to be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah.
Should we move to rendering a conclusion on that note?
I think so. So for me, this one is obviously it's very recent. So some of the acquisitions we do, and we're looking back at Bungie or companies that are 10 plus years old. In previous episodes, we have a lot of information to be able to render a conclusion on. And in this case, I think it's pretty new. But Kathleen, like you were saying, you look at the financials from each of the companies over the entire existence of the companies, and it looks like kind of 1/3, 2/3. So the way that we generally grade this acquisition is from the perspective of the acquirer. So from Zillow Group's perspective, was this an A, B, C, D? And to me, this is a solid B plus. It's sort of obvious. It's amazing that that you guys did the legwork to really get the deal done. It's an accelerant to the business. It has all kinds of returns, but our A's, and we've said this on other episodes, are for these like ridiculous multiple 10x things in the
Instagrams,
the Instagrams, the Androids, the things that change the course or save a business. To me, I think, like we've been talking about earlier, I feel like a B plus with some variance here and there to see where it goes in the next few years is what
one of the things for me,
right.
I was super impressed doing the research for this episode, reading the filings, and then talking to you now, like you guys did just such a professional and elegant job valuing this deal, negotiating it, making it happen, dealing with all these roadblocks along the way. And, actually this will come up in my carve out in a minute, but, when the FTC review and the and the list hub, situation, even though you knew that might have been coming anyway, really impeccable job. But this is just an A plus execution deal.
Yes.
Overall, I agree with you, Ben. It's a fantastic deal, but when Instagram is our benchmark, that's just a different class of acquisition. And you guys might ultimately have Instagram type acquisitions that way surprise you on the upside. But you thought this would give you. You knew exactly that this would boost your traffic by 30 about a third. You paid about a third of the combined company market cap for it. Made total sense. So I'm going to go also with B, and then the plus, B plus, B for the deal, and plus for the execution.
Excellent. Well, I will humbly accept your compliments on the execution. I often said during the time that everything was happening that I felt like I was living in a textbook, and that the opportunity to participate in a deal like this in the way it played out really only comes along once in a lifetime. Yeah. So it was a fantastic experience for our whole team. I think B plus is fair because I think we're early days still in reaping the benefits of this combination. And as I said earlier, there are all kinds of ways in which we've benefited that we hadn't foreseen.
Yeah. All right, let's move quickly into the tail end of our show. We have 3 quick sections: follow-ups on episodes we've done in the past where new news has come out, hot takes on deals that are relevant in the moment in the press, and then carve-outs, my favorite at the end. First, follow-ups. Ben, Snap Inc.
Yeah, I'll be buying some spectacles. I can tell you that much.
Snapchat is releasing basically the cool version of Google Glass and changing their name to Snap Inc. Had an Apple moment.
They are. And, when we talk about Apple moment, I haven't been this excited about kind of following a company since the early days of Apple's renaissance.
Yeah.
I can't help but feel like what Snapchat is doing right now is so, it's smart and super ambitious and so unexpected. I tweeted this when they dropped chat and they just became Snap Inc. It reminds me a lot of Apple dropping computer from their name, and they have ambitions far beyond being constrained to exactly the form that they're in now. And I think that I've been thinking like, oh, they're this new form of communication, but this kind of changes it outside the software world. And I think where Snap is going right, where Google went wrong with glasses, they're not starting with these ridiculous grand plans of like, you can do anything on this thing. The comp for me is, you look at Postmates and they said, you can order anything. And Uber said, you can literally just order me to drive you from here to there. And people immediately latched on to that. Oh, I get it. Uber is for taking me places. And so I think with, Google Glass being, who knows what it will do for you. What the Spectacles does is here, it's just for this little thing. We'll see if we expand from there. But right now it's a toy. It's almost flamboyant. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. Try it out.
My favorite take on this was I saw Bill Gurley retweeted a tweet from one of the Collison brothers, the founders of Stripe, saying something to the effect of, it is Snapchat with this move, like just following Snapchat in general, like they are just so astonishingly original in what they do. And I think that's like why they've kind of captured this zeitgeist. It's they're not like, X for Y. It's, even though this is Google Glass done right, it's like whoever would have thought that Snapchat would release sunglasses that take video? Like super cool. Kathleen, are you going to buy a pair?
I'm on my way now. No, I thought they were pretty cool. And I have to say, I like the blue lipstick too.
Yeah.
I've actually seen lots of comments about that.
Hot takes moving on from one social media empire to, on the rise to one potentially on the decline. Twitter. Whew, we talked about this with Alex from Bloomberg on our last show, but also heating up.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting that the most credible rumor yet is the Disney, the potential Disney offer coming in, and awesome having Alex on the last show. Alex actually broke the story that people familiar with the matter, both from Disney and from Twitter.
People, not person.
That's right. Our sources in kind of confirming that the two are in talks. So seems to be a little out of the woodwork, but makes a lot of sense when you think about Disney's other acquisitions of late. It's not just Mickey Mouse. It's really a media empire. I mean, if Disney owns ESPN, why couldn't they own Twitter?
Disney's made some great acquisitions that we've talked about on the show already. Pixar, Lucasfilm. But like so many companies these days, like they face, as successful as they are, like they're an industrial age company, and like what is Disney's future in the information age? And they've done great things organically. Magic bands are an incredible experience if you haven't gotten to do it yet at the parks.
That's the thing you wear on your wrist at the Disney theme parks.
But yeah, well, I don't know. Who knows what'll happen with this? There will be an episode coming, I'm sure. Next, real quick hot take. We got some requests for this in the Slack channel. This is pretty amazing. A company called AppLovin, that is a mobile app marketing, broad-based marketing firm, customer acquisition, advertising, and analytics, was just acquired by a Chinese private equity firm for $1.4 billion. They were basically bootstrapped. They'd raised about $4 million in kind of seed money that they didn't really need. They were profitable the whole time. Pretty incredible story.
Yeah, and pretty unprecedented to have a bootstrap company turn into that. I mean, they almost always have institutional backing.
Yep.
And I think my only comment on this one is it's interesting to see how history repeats itself. I think 10 years ago, we were in the same place with email marketing and the start of sort of the digital marketing
that we talked about with Scott on Exact Target.
Exactly. Now seeing it in the mobile era.
Yep. Okay, that's what we got. Carve-outs. Ben.
Yeah, so for any new listeners, this is a thing that is unrelated to the episode or really the theme of the show in general, but it's just something we've enjoyed over the past few weeks. There's a great video floating around called The Marvel Symphonic Universe, and it's on YouTube, and it looks at why is it that we can, on command, hum the theme of Star Wars, James Bond, but when asked, how about any of the Marvel movies, despite being the highest grossing franchise ever in Hollywood, none of us can hum a Marvel franchise theme.
Oh.
So it goes into...
Yeah, I have no idea what the...
Yeah, when you start peeling that apart, one of the really interesting things they bring up is temp music. and it's so cool to watch what music the director used as temporary music. Like, oh yeah, grab that one song from that other movie and throw it in until the real music is written and composed for this movie. And it's a super interesting 10-minute watch. So highly recommend it.
That's fascinating. Mine is a book I just finished reading that lots of people recommended to me. Is Phil Knight, the founder of Nike's memoir Shoe Dog, and had some personal significance for me because Phil actually, I went to Stanford Business School, where I studied on the Knight Management Center campus that Phil donated to Stanford, an incredible new campus for the business school that was constructed a few years ago. And then Phil gave the graduation speech at my graduation. And it was, in many ways, although we didn't know it at the time, kind of an outline of this book. And I went back and rewatched it. The book is fantastic. It's, it's, I guess broadly you'd call it a business book, but it's really just the story of Nike and it's pretty incredible. And one of my favorite thing from it is in the introduction, Phil talks about going for a run in 1962. He just graduated from Stanford, had this crazy idea to start a shoe company, and he's just thinking like, I have no idea where this is going to go, but I'm just running. I'm going to keep running, and I'm not going to stop. Don't stop. And that's just he's like, I made so many mistakes, so many things I regret along the way, but like I just kept going and like didn't stop, and that's where he is today. So a great book.
Very cool. Kathleen, do you have a carve out?
Sure. Mine's a little more frivolous. My husband and I spend our free time traveling to music festivals, and thought I would recommend the band of the summer, which for us was the Struts. So if you're in need of a dose of glam rock, I would say check them out.
Nice. Love it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all we've got for today. So Kathleen, where can our listeners find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Kathleen Phillips on Twitter with one L in Phillips.
On Disney Twitter. No.
That's right.
Awesome.
Thank you again, Kathleen. This has been super fun. And also always great to have a hometown Seattle company on the show.
That's right.
It was my pleasure. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to talk about one of our favorite companies, Statsig.
Yes, long-time acquired partner. There is a reason why the best product teams at companies like OpenAI and Notion, Atlassian, Figma, Rippling, Brex, and more rely on Statsig, whether they are iterating on their core product features or shipping AI-powered experiences at scale.
Yep. In the crazy speed of today's AI world, shipping fast is just table stakes now. It's basically trivial to build and deploy your app constantly. The real advantage is how quickly you learn what changes actually created value for customers and how fast you can use that signal to guide what you ship next. Whether it's a feature tweak, a pricing change, a performance improvement, or an AI update like a model change or prompt adjustment, they're not relying on instinct. They're measuring what actually moved engagement, retention, and ultimately revenue. And as more teams build with AI, that learning loop becomes even more important. Building with LLMs introduces non-determinism into your product experience. The same input doesn't always produce the same output, and behavior can shift in subtle ways in real-world use.
So doing offline evals will give you part of the picture, but you can really only understand the impact once your product is live with real users, and then you can measure how their behavior actually changes. It's very different than the way that you would ship features in a pre-AI world where you knew exactly what the software was going to do in production.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is where Statsig comes in. It brings experimentation, feature flags, and product analytics into one unified system so teams can ship safely, test rigorously, and directly link what they changed to how users actually behaved. The result is a tighter feedback loop and learning that compounds over time, so you don't just ship more, you ship better.
So if you want to make learning your competitive advantage, whether you're building new AI experiences or just evolving your existing core product, go to statsig.com/acquired to get started.
Well, for any listeners, if this is your first episode and you'd like to hear more, subscribe through your favorite podcasting client. And if you enjoyed it, feel free to share it with your friends or leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks so much for listening.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now?